I sat in the fourth row, surrounded by a sea of suits and the faint mix of coffee and expensive perfume. On stage, Ryan Mercer was in his element, waving his hands like a man conducting an orchestra. Each slide flashing behind him burned with numbers and ambition. Pulse Core, the future of adaptive data. The crowd applauded. I stayed quiet. Ryan spoke smoothly, smiled on cue. I knew those pauses, those practiced emphases. I'd helped him write presentations like this. When he said we, I heard I. When he said proprietary technology, I heard someone else's work. A young woman beside me leaned over and whispered, "Do you work at Neuronova too?" I smiled. I used to, a long time ago. Light bounced off the paper cup in front of me, trembling every time Ryan raised his voice. It reminded me of the first time I demoed that same algorithm in our old conference room, the empty cup shaking in rhythm with my heartbeat. When the code ran smoothly, the team cheered, and I laughed until I cried. Back then, I thought happiness in this job was that simple. The sixth slide appeared. A code snippet filled the giant screen. In the corner, a small comment. E. Cruz, La V1. I stopped breathing. No one noticed. They were too busy filming and posting. But I saw it. That signature was mine, the one I'd typed late one winter night, my hands trembling from caffeine, my heart full of hope. I'd shortened my name, thinking no one would ever read those comments. I was right. They didn't read them. But they still used them. Ryan raised his hand toward the chart. "This is the breakthrough our engineering team worked tirelessly to achieve," he declared, with that polished, too perfect smile, the kind that belongs to people who think truth is someone else's burden. I wasn't angry, not anymore. That emotion had long cooled into something heavier, clarity, the kind that settles in when you stand inside a room once yours and realize everything now carries someone else's name tag. I stood. The seats rustled. A few glanced up, then back to the glowing stage. Ryan was nearing the finale. I didn't need to hear the rest. The hallway outside was colder than I expected. Rain tapped against the glass roof, Seattle's familiar percussion, the scent of damp air mixed with coffee from the kiosk nearby. I leaned on the railing, watching people come and go, investors, engineers, dreamers, all buzzing about innovation, partnerships, the future. I saw something else, the present and the past that never got its closure. In my head, my father's voice came back, rough and tired, but teasing as ever. "When you build something, make sure your name stays on it, kid. Paperwork protects your mind, not trust." I used to laugh, call him old-fashioned. Now I just wish I'd listened. A group of reporters hurried past, leaving behind the faint smell of ink and printed paper. I wondered if any of them knew the truth behind those shiny headlines. Probably not. The world prefers stories about winners, not the ones erased along the way. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app. A blank page. I typed 4 words. "We start from here." I wasn't sure who "we" was. Maybe me and my father. Maybe everyone who'd ever been cut out of their own story. But I knew one thing. Every beginning starts with a crack. And this was mine. I slid the phone back into my pocket, pulled up my coat, and stepped outside. The rain soaked my hair, cold and sharp. I looked up at the conference sign, glowing in blue, its reflection smudged across the wet pavement. One deep breath. Then I turned away. Seattle was strangely calm, the kind of calm that only those who've endured too long can finally appreciate. I walked past glass windows that mirrored me, damp, tired, but still standing. In my mind, old lines of code returned, each symbol tapping softly against memory. Every footstep on the wet ground felt like the countdown to a new chapter. No plan, no spectacle, just one truth. I won't let anyone else finish the story that bears my name. I stopped under an awning, the rain drumming steadily on the tin roof. Seattle was wet, cold, yet oddly comforting. Real stories don't begin with applause. They begin in silence, in the quiet breath of those who still believe that justice is worth waiting for. And if you're hearing this now, maybe you've felt it too, that moment when your name fades among the polished crowd. I understand. Maybe you're driving home. Maybe you're sipping your morning coffee. Wherever you are, tell me, where are you listening from? Because I believe each of us carries a fragment of our own unfinished story. And sometimes, just speaking it softly is enough to begin again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the old cafe on the corner of Broadway, the one with the half flickering neon sign. The barista, his hair now silver, looked up and smiled. Been a while since you stopped by. Still iced Americano? I nodded. Some habits exist just to remind you that even when everything changes, you haven't disappeared from yourself. The yellow light cast soft shadows across the scratched wooden table. Every mark felt like a timestamp, something you can't erase, no matter how hard you try. I opened my laptop, not to work, but to stare at the blank screen the way you sometimes stare at your own reflection, trying to remember who's behind it. I thought back to a summer morning in Texas, 7 years ago. The heat swallowed the air, and I was standing outside a convention hall debating whether to walk in. A hackathon. I hadn't planned to join. 3 rejections from major companies had drained every ounce of faith I had left, but my roommate had dragged me there anyway. Come on, you never know what you'll find. Opportunity, I remember thinking, rarely comes with a signpost. Inside, keyboards clicked in rhythm with the smell of pizza and the hum of conversation. I was just there to test a few lines of code I'd been tinkering with during sleepless nights, a self-learning load balancing algorithm. When I ran it and saw the system respond flawlessly, my heart raced. Not for the prize, but for the pure electric joy of seeing an idea come to life exactly as I imagined. A man stood behind me. His voice was low and hoarse, kind but tired. Do you know what you just did? If this scales, it's worth a company. I turned around. Ryan Mercer, guest judge, senior engineer at NeuroNova Systems. He reached out a hand. Ryan, I think we should talk. 3 months later, I was in Seattle with a torn suitcase, an old laptop, and my father's photo on the desk. Ryan interviewed me himself and said, "We can't promise a big paycheck, but here, you'll have the freedom to experiment." Freedom. That word was big enough to make a 24-year-old girl leave everything behind. In the early days at NeuroNova, we worked in the basement of an old building on Pike Street. The lights flickered, the AC wheezed like a truck. The walls smelled of dust and code. I didn't care. I coded 14 hours a day, so absorbed that I forgot to eat, forgot to call home. When I ran the test, the system froze for a heartbeat. Then the data spiked to a number no one believed. Latency down by 37%. Ryan clapped me on the shoulder, his face glowing. Elena, this is the future. I didn't know whose future, but I believed him. We spent nights awake, sketching flowcharts on walls, slurping instant noodles, laughing over stupid bugs. Ryan told me, "Don't be afraid to be wrong. The ones who fear mistakes never discover truth." I thought he understood me, a true partner in a world that only spoke the language of performance and profit. When the project was officially named PulseCore, Ryan texted me, "Juno had Jupiter. We have Pulse." I smiled. I didn't know that would be the last time he said we. The project grew fast and meetings began, investors, presentations, perfectly polished slides. The first time I heard someone say Ryan's team instead of Elena's algorithm, I didn't react. I told myself it didn't matter. Everyone knew who wrote the core. Then launch day came. An email invited me to the product showcase. In the development credits, my name was listed last, after an intern who'd joined 2 months ago. I read that email over and over until the words blurred. I wasn't angry, just cold. That night, I called my father. "Dad, I think they forgot me." He chuckled softly. "People forget the ones they need most, because they trust you'll remember them instead." I didn't understand, but the sound of his coughing made me stop asking. He used to be an engineer, too. Lost a patent once, to someone he trusted. Maybe that's why he understood. I stayed. For the health insurance. For stability. And maybe, deep down, because I still believed Ryan would do the right thing. But the work changed. I stopped creating and started maintaining. fixing bugs, mentoring newcomers, writing reports. Ryan, now CTO, rarely visited the floor. When he did, he still smiled and said, "Good work, Elena," but his eyes had the distance of someone already gone. One night, after everyone left, I stared at the lines of code streaming across the screen. The reflection on the glass blurred into the rain outside, endless strings of data falling from the sky. I typed one last comment: Cruz V1, optimization after failure. A little defiant, a quiet reminder. I thought, if people forget me, at least the code will remember. Time passed. NeuroNova expanded. PulseCore became its flagship product, and I faded. New teams came in. To them, Ryan was the mind behind it all. In meetings, he spoke of vision and breakthroughs. I wrote documentation. One afternoon, while I was revising a report, he patted my shoulder. "You're the best I've ever had, Elena, but you need to learn to let go. Individual credit burns people out." I smiled. He thought he was giving advice. I heard a warning. A year later, my father passed away. I flew back to Texas for the funeral. Ryan sent flowers and a card. "Thank you for your contributions." No condolences, just 6 words, the period at the end of an employment sentence. When I returned to Seattle, my position was reassigned. Restructuring, HR said, with that scripted smile like an automated response. I was moved to a systems support group. Cleaner work, higher pay, but far from the world I built. The first night in the new office, I looked through the glass and saw the old lab still lit. Ryan stood there, surrounded by young engineers. He was smiling, just like the first day I met him at the hackathon. Only now I was on the outside. I went home and opened the earliest files of PulseCore. Line by line, comment by comment, I read the trail of my younger self, the one who believed in freedom, in building something pure. I realized then, faith doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes, quietly, like paint peeling off walls after too much rain. I closed the laptop. The cafe was nearly empty. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. A woman walked in, soaked, laughing about the cold. I looked at her and saw a version of myself from years ago, bright-eyed, trusting, not yet erased from her own creation. I exhaled softly. At any age, faith must learn how to survive. The first morning I returned to work after the funeral, Seattle was still raining. Rain streaked across the 17th floor windows, like lines of code being deleted. I stood and watched the city through the fogged glass, my coffee cooling in my hand. Inside, NeuroNova smelled of ambition, a mix of hunger, caffeine, and pressure. Ryan had become an icon. His face ran on the tech magazine with the headline, "The Brain Behind the Data Revolution." I flipped the paper on my desk and thought about how a flash can make everyone else vanish from a frame. I was not angry, just tired. 7 years, and not one day under 10 hours. I thought I deserved at least some fairness. Not glory, not bouquets, just a little recognition. The meeting took place in a glass room, lit so bright it felt surgical. White light bounced off the steel table and made the whole space feel like an operating theater where everyone feared being the patient. Ryan arrived 5 minutes late. Same shirt, same loose tie, faint cologne. He smiled, that familiar half-close, half-distant smile. "Elena, I heard you want to talk about the new contract?" I nodded. "Yes, I have been here 7 years. I would like a 10% adjustment. It seems reasonable for the responsibilities I carry." He sat, steepled his fingers, and paused. 10%, he repeated, as if tasting the number. Then he laughed. A small laugh, but in the closed room it echoed. "Elena, you know, at your level, raises are not so simple. You do not hold managerial duties. You are not the one speaking at conferences." I cut in calmly. "I wrote the core of PulseCore." "Yes, and you were paid accordingly," he said, leaning back, his tone soft as if soothing a child. "Consider it part of our shared legacy." Legacy. The word dropped like a weight and left a long silence. I looked at him and remembered the nights he sat beside me in the basement, talking about changing the world with tech. The world had changed, all right. It just had no room for me. "Ryan," I said, "I am not asking for charity. I just want fairness. He shrugged, the smile unchanged. Fairness, he said, is hard to quantify, Elena. You are talented, everyone knows that. But the company needs people who can talk to investors, not just to code. My throat tightened. Not about money, but about how he said you are talented, everyone knows, like a polite way of saying you are done. He stood and closed the meeting with that same smile. Think of it this way, Elena. You are the foundation. Foundations rarely get noticed, but without them, the building falls. I am sure you understand. I stared at my hand, the dried coffee stain under my nail, then looked up. Every building collapses when people forget who poured the first concrete. He paused a beat, then smiled. There are always people who think that way. He left, and the glass door sighed shut like the end of a sour note. I sat alone. White light reflected off the glass, and my face in the mirror looked foreign, tired, stripped of that old naive trust. I thought of my father and what he told me before he died. Do not let them write your name on what you built and call it theirs. I had laughed then, told him not to worry. Now I understand that sometimes those who went before you see things you are not brave enough to face. I left the conference room and walked the long glass hallway. My shadow skewed under my feet in the reflected light. The office buzzed as usual. A young engineer greeted me, eyes bright like mine had been on day one. I nodded, but inside I felt something else, a sorrow mixed with pity. Not for her, but for the me of many years ago. At lunch, I sat in the cafeteria watching rain bead the window. Colleagues chatted about the next project, laughed when Ryan's name came up. I stayed quiet, their voices a background track to a movie I no longer starred in. Back at my desk, HR had left an email. Thank you for your dedication. At this time, the company cannot adjust salaries due to the quarter's locked budget. We hope you will continue to trust and support our vision. The word "are" italicized, as if to soften the blow. I deleted the email without replying. Instead, I opened my old repo, the private folder on my laptop, the original Pulse core. Line by line, it read like my handwriting. I found the last comment I left 3 years ago. One day, this code will speak for itself. Today, I thought maybe that day had come. I closed the laptop and watched the rain. Across the street, a billboard lit with Ryan's face and the tagline, "The Mind Behind Pulse Core." I smiled, unsure if it was bitter or amused. In that moment, something shifted. Not fury, not despair, just clarity. If I wanted to take back what was mine, I could not ask for permission anymore. I stood, shrugged on my coat, and walked out. Cold rain hit my face, exhaust mixed with the smell of coffee. The city went on, indifferent to the meeting, to the woman who had lost her faith. I walked straight, not looking back. No plan, no dramatic revenge, just one thought repeating in my head. If they forget me, I will make them remember. Not with noise, but with the kind of quiet that weighs more than any excuse. That night, I went back to my small apartment in Capitol Hill. The streetlight cast a faded yellow glow on the wall, cold and thin. The rain outside the window sounded like a countdown to something I hadn't yet named. My laptop was open on the table. Out of habit, I logged into NeuroNova's internal data portal. Something I'd done for years, since the days I used to manage the system myself. Nothing unusual until I saw a file I'd never noticed before. The label read, Intellectual Property Transfer, Pulse Core Framework. I read slowly, line by line. Under Primary Inventor was the name, Ryan Mercer. Under Contributors was a long list, but no E. Cruz. My name was gone. Cleanly, neatly, as if I had never existed. A chill ran down my back. Not from the air conditioning, but from the realization that this had been planned all along. I thought of the meeting that morning. Ryan's smile, his words. Foundations are rarely seen. Maybe he was right. He just forgot to mention that sometimes people tear out the foundation when they want to rebuild the house under a different name. I printed the document. The paper trembled slightly in my hand. The ink was still wet. I stared at the lines and thought of my father. The story he told me as a child about his first patent and how someone took it from him with a single clause he hadn't read. He once said, A signature can turn a lifetime of work into a spell that erases your name. I hadn't understood then. Now I understand too well. The next morning, I went to see Harold, the lawyer who'd helped me file the preliminary patent for PulseCore 7 years earlier. His office was in an old building near Lake Union, where the carpet smelled faintly of dust and stale coffee. He recognized me right away, though my hair was longer and my eyes carried new lines. "Elena," he said warmly, "it's been ages. I heard you've done well at Neuronova." I smiled faintly. "Not exactly. I need you to verify something. The PulseCore patent. I want to see the original filing we submitted." He scrolled through his system, squinting behind old glasses. Then he sighed, long and heavy. "I'm afraid I don't have it anymore. When your company filed the final version, it transferred legal representation to its in-house counsel. I closed the case and received the final fee 3 years ago. They said you'd approved it." "I never approved anything," I said quietly. He looked at me, hesitation flickering in his eyes. "Elena, listen. The world doesn't work the way we want it to. When people have power, they rewrite history, on paper and in other people's memories." His words echoed in my head as I left the office. Outside, it was raining again. Heavy drops thudded against my coat. I walked aimlessly, trying to stay ahead of my own thoughts. On a soaked street corner, a thrift store door stood half open. I stopped by the window, watching my reflection in the dim light. The person staring back looked like a stranger, not the young engineer who once believed in creative freedom, but someone who had just watched her dream taken apart. That night, I opened my laptop again. The old project files were still there, silent witnesses no one had bothered to question. I created a new folder and named it E-Cruz-Archive. Not for revenge, for the record. To remind myself that some truths need to be preserved, even if no one believes them. I backed up every log, every test build, every handwritten note I'd scanned over the years. Each file was a fragment of memory, a piece of evidence from a past someone was trying to erase. By the time the upload finished, it was close to midnight. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, the blue glow of the screen washing over my face. No music, no tears, just one thought, clear and steady. I'd let them take too much, for too long. After that night, I started doing what I probably should have done years ago, reading the past. Not through photos or old messages, but through the lines of code, reports, and logs that hold a more honest kind of memory than people ever do. Every morning before work, I sat in the same old cafe on Olive Street. The smell of roasted beans and the sound of rain tapping against the window became the soundtrack to my daily ritual. Open the laptop, trace each breadcrumb left along PulseCore's path. The more I read, the more I saw the shift. In my original build, PulseCore was just a data optimization framework. But in the newer versions, I found fragments that didn't belong, new queries, unfamiliar parameters, hints that it was now collecting far more than it needed: user behavior, locations, even voice samples. I sat still for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe it was a technical misunderstanding, but another part, older, quieter, knew exactly what it meant. Someone had pushed PulseCore far beyond its original purpose. That afternoon, I brought the documents to Nadia, a former teammate from the infrastructure division. Nadia was pragmatic, loyal to systems more than people. If anyone still trusted me, it would be her. In the cramped server room filled with cables and humming machines, I showed her the code comparison. She frowned. "This is surveillance data. Why is it inside PulseCore?" "I don't know," I said. "But if it's real, it could breach our compliance agreements." She went silent for a moment, then whispered, "Elena, be careful. Too many hands are on this system now. No one wants to be the one who found something." I understood. In this place, silence was survival. Later that day, I returned to my desk. Ryan was walking down the hall beside Miranda, the CEO of NeuroNova. Miranda wore a gray suit, sharp as a blade. I'd only met her a few times, but each time the air seemed to drop a degree colder. As they passed, Ryan gave me a polite nod. Miranda didn't look directly at me. but her gaze lingered on my screen long enough to send a chill down my spine. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the office after hours, when the lights dimmed and only the steady hum of the servers filled the air. I reopened the PulseCore architecture file, scanning through the updated lines. Then I saw it, a new comment from the last build. Behavioral pattern extension, per management request. I didn't need to be a genius to know what per management request meant. I pulled out my notebook and began writing. Every change, every system access, every signature. No plan. Just record keeping, like someone documenting the weather before a storm. The next morning, Nadia texted me. They're auditing internal access. Did you open any files last night? I stared at the message, my chest tightening. Maybe they already knew. By afternoon, Ryan stopped by my desk. His smile was the same, but his eyes were cautious. Elena, I heard you've been looking into PulseCore's core framework. I was just checking performance metrics, I said evenly. He smiled, almost kindly. Be careful. Sometimes curiosity makes people misunderstand your intentions. He walked away, his words hanging in the air like a warning disguised as advice. That evening, I sat in my apartment, watching the streetlights blur across the wet window. I thought about everything: my father, Ryan, the years of trust, and the code being twisted into something unrecognizable. I couldn't help but laugh quietly. People will do anything in the name of innovation, as long as it's profitable. I opened the eCruise archive folder and added new entries: dates, server IDs, access logs, and usernames. Everything preserved, not to accuse, but to protect the truth before it vanished. A week later, I received an internal meeting invite. Project review with Miranda, top floor. When I entered, everyone was already seated. Ryan sat beside her, expression unreadable. Miranda began, her tone level but sharp. PulseCore is expanding its application scope. We're about to sign a major contract, so we'll be reviewing all system access. I expect full compliance from everyone. Remember, data is an asset, not a toy. She paused, her eyes landing on me. Elena, you know the core better than anyone. I trust you'll help keep everything running smoothly. I nodded. Of course. And, she added, colder now, I hope no one here confuses data access with ownership. The words hung heavy, no one spoke, but I knew she wasn't talking in general. When the meeting ended, people filed out quietly. Ryan approached me. Don't take it personally, she exaggerates. I smiled faintly. I just didn't realize reading my own code could be a crime. He exhaled, uneasy. Sometimes the best thing to do is let things go. Trust me. Trust you? I asked, eyes steady on his. I already did. He didn't answer, just nodded and walked away. I stayed by the window, watching the city stretch out beneath the rain. From up here, every light looked small, even the buildings named after people who believed they'd live forever in glass and steel. I didn't know what would come next. I only knew one thing. Every line of code I ever wrote, no matter how it was changed, misused, or buried, still carried my fingerprint. And maybe someday the truth would work the same way, slow, patient, but impossible to erase. In the days after the meeting, the atmosphere at the office changed. No one said anything out loud, but the way people looked at me did. Some avoided my eyes, others glanced my way with that uneasy mix of curiosity and fear. Rumors spread fast in any organization, especially when someone dared to question what everyone else treated as untouchable. I worked as usual, only now I watched more carefully. Every email was read twice. Every file I opened was logged in a small notebook. Not for protection, but for memory, because human memory alone is never enough to serve as proof. Ryan crossed paths with me less often, but when he did, there was something new in his eyes. Not confidence, not guilt, but the look of someone balancing on a tightrope between two towers. I wondered if he remembered that first day in the basement when our only goal was to make a system run faster, not for profit, but for the simple beauty of seeing it work flawlessly. One Thursday afternoon, he stopped by my desk and said quietly, "Miranda wants to speak with you. 3 o'clock, top floor conference room." He didn't meet my eyes, just left a stack of folders on the desk and walked away. At 3, I entered the room. Miranda was already there, the Seattle skyline burning gold behind her. The light made her eyes gleam, cold, sharp, precise, like the edge of a scalpel. "Elena," she began, "you've been one of our most capable engineers, but lately there have been stories that you've been reviewing old data, looking for errors, and backing up internal files. I want to hear it directly from you. Is that true?" I kept my tone steady. "I reviewed some sections because parts of the code had been altered without attribution. I felt responsible for ensuring the system still ran as designed." Miranda leaned back in her chair. "Responsibility," she repeated. "A beautiful word. But in our environment, the line between responsibility and intrusion is very thin. You understand that, don't you?" "I do," I said. "And I also understand that when someone changes data structures without acknowledgement, that's not innovation, it's distortion." For a moment, the room thickened with silence. I could hear the rain striking the glass above us. Miranda didn't speak for so long. I thought she might call security. Then she smiled, a strange, deliberate smile, somewhere between respect and warning. "You've got fire," she said quietly. "I used to be like you, believing I could keep the world straight with a few lines of code. Then one day I realized the only thing that truly exists is control." She stood, stepped closer. "Don't turn yourself into the company's enemy, Elena. If you feel you've been treated unfairly, talk to me. But don't let misplaced conviction make you lose everything." I met her gaze. "If fairness costs me everything, maybe I never really had anything to begin with." She paused, tilted her head, slightly, then smiled again. "I'll remember that." And the meeting was over. That night, I sat by the window of my apartment, and the city lights reflected on the desk. I didn't feel victorious or defeated, just tired. But beneath the fatigue, something shifted, calm. Maybe confrontation didn't need to be loud. Maybe simply speaking the truth, once, was enough to alter the course of a current. I opened my notebook and wrote down everything that had happened, not as evidence, just to stay clear-headed. At the bottom of the page, I added one line. Sometimes standing still is its own form of resistance. When I closed the notebook, I felt strangely lighter. I didn't know what Miranda would do next, what Ryan would say, or how NeuroNova would move forward. But I knew one thing. In a world where everyone feared losing their seat or speaking the truth, quiet honesty was already an act of courage. I turned off the lights. The city still glowed, the rain had stopped, and I knew this was only the beginning of what truly mattered, finding meaning in creating something I'd never regret. The morning began with a strange message. "You should come in early today. Something's happening on the executive floor." It was from Nadia. I read it once, set my phone down, and felt a weight settle in my chest like a stone. Outside, Seattle was soaked in mist, the kind of thin gray rain that blurred the edges of everything. I brewed my coffee, watching the dark liquid drip slowly, trying to hold on to routine as a way to stay calm. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. When I arrived at the office, the air was different. No laughter, no morning greetings. People moved quickly, avoiding each other's eyes. In the hallway, two members of the legal team passed by, arms full of thick folders. The elevator doors opened on the 19th floor. A crowd had gathered around the large screen in the lounge. I stepped closer. On the screen was the Tech Frontier homepage, the headline flashing in red. NeuroNova accused of illegally harvesting user data through PulseCore platform. Below it was a photo of Ryan, mid-speech at a conference, smiling under stage lights. I froze. The entire building seemed to fall silent. The sharp click of Miranda's heels cut through the air. She walked straight through the group without a word, gesturing for everyone to disperse. When her eyes met mine, I knew what was coming. "Elena," she said evenly, her voice low but precise, "we need to talk. Now." The top floor conference room, the same one where I'd once been warned, was packed. White light glared off the glass table. Ryan sat at the head, his face ashen. Beside him were the legal team, a recorder, and a few strangers wearing guest badges. Investigators, most likely. Miranda stood with both hands on the table. The press has obtained internal documents, she said. Not excerpts, the entire PulseCore update chain from the past 3 months. They're questioning the source and intent of the collected data. I want answers. Ryan spoke first, voice rough. We were only expanding the system's learning capabilities. No personal data was misused. One of the investigators interrupted. Is that so? Because the technical logs include the name Elena Cruz, the engineer who wrote the core algorithm. The room turned toward me. I took a slow breath. Yes, I wrote the core. But the later updates weren't part of the original design. I flagged those anomalies months ago. Miranda's eyes glinted. Do you have proof? I do. I opened my laptop and plugged in the small hard drive I always carried. On the screen, version histories appeared, each edit, each access, time-stamped and traceable. I said nothing more. I let the data speak. The room went dead silent, except for the faint clacking of keys. The comparison chart filled the display. One harmless line of code transformed over time into a sophisticated data harvesting network. Cold, precise, deliberate. Ryan's head lowered, his fists clenched. Miranda folded her arms, eyes fixed on the screen without blinking. Finally, she spoke. Thank you, Elena. I think we're clear. Legal will take it from here. She turned to Ryan. Do you have anything to say? He looked up, voice trembling slightly. Every decision went through you. Miranda raised an eyebrow, unshaken. I approved innovation, not deception. The words landed like a blade. The meeting dragged on until noon. By the time I stepped out, my hands were shaking despite how calm I tried to appear. The hallway buzzed with stares, some wary, some quietly acknowledging. Relief and emptiness mixed in my chest like oil and water. I went straight to the balcony on the 17th floor. Wind whipped around me. The city below shimmered under the rain. I looked at the glowing buildings and thought about all the people who'd built PulseCore, all the trust that had been traded away. A moment later, Ryan found me. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose. Elena, he began, voice low. I don't even know where to start. Maybe I was wrong. I stayed silent. He continued, I thought I could control it, that expanding data access would make the product stronger. Miranda pushed, the investors wanted results, and then I just let it go. No, Ryan, I said quietly. You didn't let it go. You steered it here. He looked down. You're leaving? I am. But not to run. I just can't stay somewhere. Truth needs a marketing department to sound acceptable. He gave a small, broken laugh. You're different from me. You think ethics can save technology. I think technology only mirrors who we already are. I met his eyes. Maybe you're right. Maybe we both are. We just built from different foundations. He nodded once, then left. The smell of rain and cologne lingered, sharp, bitter, fading. That afternoon, an internal email went out. NeuroNova announces temporary suspension of PulseCore operations pending investigation. Below was a list of employees placed on leave. Ryan's name was there. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. Just finished, like closing a book I'd been reading for too long. That evening, Nadia stopped by my apartment. She set a paper bag on the table. Coffee, she said. You probably need it today. We sat in silence for a while before she finally asked, Do you regret it? I looked out the window where the last drops of rain traced slow paths down the glass. Regret telling the truth? No. I only regret staying quiet for so long. She smiled faintly. I guess you're leaving soon. I need space, I said. Not to hide, to begin again. With something I still believe in. When she left, I stayed in the stillness of the room. I opened my notebook and wrote a new line beneath the last one. Truth doesn't need defenders. It only needs people unafraid to repeat it. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement like glass. I looked down and caught my own reflection. Not angry, not afraid, just calm. Tomorrow, Neuronova would be on every front page. And me, I'd just be one small name in 100 stories. But at least, it would be my real name. I left Neuronova on a Monday morning. No rain, no sun, just a pale light spreading across the city. Seattle felt tired, like me. My employee badge sat on the reception desk. A small piece of plastic, edges worn, but heavy enough to carry a lifetime of memory. "Thank you for being part of the journey," the receptionist said, in that familiar tone used for every tech farewell. I smiled, said nothing. The glass door closed behind me, and in that small click, I heard the quiet ending of 7 years. I didn't go straight home. I turned down a narrow street that led to the docks. The smell of salt and the cry of seagulls brought me back to the days right after graduation, when all I had was a backpack, a few lines of code, and the belief that the world would be fair if I worked hard enough. Now I knew. Fairness isn't something you're given. It's something you build. I bought a train ticket to Portland. No plan, no timeline. Just the need to leave a city where every building reflected an old version of me. On the slow train south, I sat by the window, watching the landscape slide by. Each turn of the wheels tapped against my thoughts. Each bridge felt like it was pulling me further from the noise I'd outgrown. In my bag was a small hard drive containing everything: source code, logs, handwritten notes from 7 years of work. I didn't keep it for its legal value, but because it was proof of my existence. A piece of my life wrapped in data, carrying faith, sweat, and all my mistakes. In Portland, I rented a tiny apartment on the second floor of an old building, paint fading, windows facing maple trees. No mechanical keyboard, no dual monitors, just my laptop and the quiet hum of wind. I slept longer that night than I had in years. The next morning, I opened my laptop. No meetings, no Slack notifications, no urgent emails, just a blank screen. I created a new file and named it Project Mirror. I didn't think, I just wrote. The first lines came out like breathing. The system shouldn't just optimize data, it should optimize people, helping them understand themselves rather than be controlled by someone else's algorithm. I stopped and smiled faintly. Each line of code felt like freedom now. No deadlines, no supervision, no labels like product or deliverable. I realized I still loved technology. I just didn't love what it had become. Days passed slowly. Mornings at the farmer's market, afternoons in a riverside cafe, nights coding my new project. Sometimes I opened old emails, some apologetic, some disguised threats wrapped in advice. "Elena, stay away from the press. They're looking for someone to blame." I laughed. I wasn't hiding. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd just chosen to be silent at the right time. A week later, Nadia texted me. "The Tech Ethics Council wants you to speak about creative ownership. They read your report. Will you go?" I stared at the screen for a while before typing back, "Yes, but I won't talk about others' mistakes. I'll talk about how we lose ourselves when we stop asking why we began." The conference took place in a small lecture hall at the University of Oregon. No stage lights, no cameras, just people, engineers, students, researchers, listening quietly. I told my story without blame or drama. I talked about passion, belief, and the price of silence. When I finished, someone asked, "If you could do it over, would you choose differently?" I said, "No, I'd just learned to stand my ground a little sooner." The room fell silent. Then applause rose. Soft, honest, enough. I bowed my head. For the first time in years, I felt peace. That night, back in my small apartment, a warm cup of tea sat on the desk. Moonlight spilled across the keyboard. I opened Project Mirror again. In the corner of the screen, a new GitHub notification appeared. Repository trending #1 in open source ethics. I laughed quietly. Not triumph, relief. People were discussing, sharing, and contributing, not for profit, but because they believed in transparency. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the wind slip through the window frame. Freedom isn't loud. It's the moment you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. I knew there would always be people like Miranda and Ryan, those who believe power is proof of talent. But I also knew there were others, somewhere out there, still writing code in the dark, believing in small, right things. And maybe that's the only force strong enough to keep the world from spinning off course. I closed the laptop. In the silence, I could hear my heartbeat. Not racing, not afraid, just steady, like someone finally, truly free. A year after I left Neuronova, the city had changed. The media storm had passed, leaving behind a fine dust of memory and the kind of lessons no one wanted to mention anymore. Yet sometimes, in the quiet, I could still hear echoes of what used to be. News about Ryan and Miranda surfaced occasionally on tech sites, like ghosts from a once brilliant past. Miranda tried to make a comeback, founding a new investment fund called Aurora Capital. In her first appearance before the press after the scandal, she wore a white suit, her smile still sharp as a blade. But the room was cold. Investors didn't forget. The name Neuronova now meant one thing: trust betrayed. Her speech lasted barely 10 minutes. No questions followed. She left the stage in silence, the kind that doesn't sting, just empties the air of interest. Ryan was different. He vanished from conferences. One journalist wrote that he lived somewhere in suburban California, in an aging house with windows that never opened. Occasionally, tech students discussed the PulseCore case, using his name as an ethics example. A developer who forgot that a signature on paper never erases the fingerprints on a product. That's how the world judges, softly but heavy enough to make sure no one forgets. As for me, I didn't follow their stories. The headlines came to me like small ripples through an inbox. Each time I read one, I smiled faintly, not out of satisfaction, but understanding. Some buildings collapse not by force, but by being left alone long enough. In Portland, life moved gently. Project Mirror kept growing. I began teaching again at a small tech center, not for prestige, but to remind young engineers that ethics isn't a footnote in documentation. One morning, while helping a group of students test a new model, a girl raised her hand. "Miss, I heard you used to work at Neuronova. If you could go back, what would you do differently?" I smiled. "I'd stay quiet." She nodded, her expression softening as if something clicked. I looked around the room, morning light streaming through the windows, falling across keyboards and eager faces. For the first time, the past felt truly closed. That afternoon, I sat alone in my usual cafe, the one that smelled of baked bread and steady rain. I opened my old notebook, the one filled with scribbles from the early PulseCore days. On the last blank page, I wrote, "No one can take away what was built with conscience." I set the pen down and exhaled, lighter. Outside, Portland shimmered with rain, every droplet reflecting the streetlights into 1,000 small stars. A group of students passed by, laughing, their voices fading into the sound of traffic. They didn't know who I was, and I didn't need them to. The world kept running, like lines of code quietly looping in the background. But this time, I wasn't afraid of losing anything, because I'd learned the simplest truth of all. Strength doesn't come from making others fall, it comes from standing back up without needing to prove a thing. I took the last sip of coffee, the bitterness just right. A chapter closed. No smoke, no ashes, only light and the calm silence of a new beginning. When I finish telling this story, I usually pause for a moment, letting the last sound settle. Everyone listening keeps something different. Some remember Elena's smile, some the rain, others the moment she said, "I'd stay quiet less." And you? Which moment in her journey stayed with you the most? Share it with me. I read every message. Sometimes what you feel becomes the next part of the story. Thank you for staying until the end. Maybe justice doesn't always arrive with thunder, but with a whisper quiet enough to be remembered forever.